of 3.5 trillion is just that, a ceiling.
There is a new wrinkle in the fight between conservative and progressive Democrats over the $3.5 trillion budget bill. So this is the bill that is supposed to pass along with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that progressives will only support that infrastructure bill if it passes along with this budget bill. The budget bill has the actual investments such as into climate change, universal pre-K, paid leave, Medicare expansion, including dental, vision, hearing, among other investments. That's the actual, investment piece of this, while the infrastructure bill is in many ways a giveaway to private corporations, but also has, some benefits in there, including investments such as replacing lead pipes. But this new wrinkle involves Democratic Majority Whip Jim Clyburn publicly negotiating down the $3.5 trillion. So I'm going to play this clip for you. He was on CNN, and then I'll get to some reactions to this from within his own party.
Ceiling of 3.5 trillion is just that, a ceiling. No one has ever said that that's an exact number or that's a floor. It's up to 3.5 trillion. Now, I see that Joe Manchin has mentioned a $1.5 trillion number. Well, somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5, there is $2 trillion. Those $2 trillion are there. And I think that there is a lot of room for people to sit down and negotiate. It may be when you're sitting around the table, you may not need 3.5 trillion to do what the president wants done and what the country needs done. But let's work on it and stay out of all of this negotiating in the media. That's not the way to negotiate. Let's keep this around the table and see what we can come up with.
All right. First, I have to comment on how absurd it is for Jim Clyburn here to say that we shouldn't be negotiating this in the media. Meanwhile, that's exactly what he just did in that clip. He's trying to negotiate down the $3.5 trillion and then says, oh, we shouldn't negotiate this in the media. Then why are you negotiating it in the media? Now, in a second, I'll get to, since Manchin was brought up there, I'll get to what Democratic leadership, especially in particular Joe Biden, what he could be doing to put some extra pressure on Joe Manchin. But before I get there, let me get to some reactions to this clip. Before I get to Democrats' reactions, let me show you some reactions from the media here. So David Sirota says, what makes this preemptive capitulation on Democrats' anti-poverty/climate bill even more grotesque is the fact that Clyburn represents a state that has large areas with very high rates of poverty and that could soon be underwater because of climate change. And Ben Dixon here saying, it never fails. Jim Clyburn's singular job is to lower the expectations of what people should demand from the government, black people specifically. So yeah, Clyburn tried to negotiate this down when, and I'll get to Pelosi's, her position on this, which should be in lockstep with Clyburn, or Clyburn should be in lockstep with her, but apparently they feel differently now. But before I get to Pelosi's reaction, let me show you Rashida Tlaib, of course, one of the fighters in Congress trying to really push for this $3.5 trillion, saying that $3.5 trillion is the floor. So Clyburn is calling it the ceiling. Rashida Tlaib is saying it's the floor, and that's because it's already been negotiated down. Bernie Sanders wanted $6 trillion in investments, and he was negotiated down to $3.5 trillion. So to then try to further negotiate, for Democrats to further negotiate against themselves to bring it down even further is ridiculous. And again, the budget bill only needs the 50 votes in the Senate to pass. The bipartisan infrastructure bill already passed. So in terms of getting the votes there, that's fine. I mean, which should give you a little indication. If that passed so easily with a lot of, I think it was like 19 Republicans on board with that in the Senate. If that passed so easily, then clearly it doesn't do all that much for people. If you have 19 Republicans on board, it's because of the corporate giveaways within that bipartisan infrastructure bill. The fight against the budget bill is the real fight here, and that's why you're seeing this back and forth even among Democrats, because there are real investments into people in the $3.5 trillion that does not exist in the bipartisan infrastructure plan. But also, Ilhan Omar reacted to this, saying, Ilhan told me today about reconciliation negotiations. Quote, it's been really clear that $3.5 trillion is the floor, not the ceiling. Says convos with progressives have not been about losing that, but making sure priorities are funded. So here you have Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar being very clear that $3.5 trillion is the floor and that they are not negotiating that down. And if they don't get that, then they will not vote on either bill. Now, also, it's not just, these progressives, it's also Democratic leadership, at least partial Democratic leadership. So Common Dreams here says, to those advocating for a lower price tag, Pelosi asked, where would you cut? Childcare? Family medical leave paid for? Universal pre-K? Home health care? Earlier this week, Jayapal, the chair of the nearly 100-member Congressional Progressive Caucus, told the Washington Post that in her view, there is no flexibility on the price tag. And it's not because I care about what the top line is, it's because I care about delivering on these benefits, said Jayapal. Quote, if we don't deliver, then I think all of the people who came out and voted for Democrats to take control of the House, the Senate, and the White House are going to come out and say, that's it. So you have here Nancy Pelosi on board with $3.5 trillion, saying, where would you cut? If you're going to cut it down, where would you cut? And Jayapal, of course, the chair of the Progressive Caucus, being very clear here that $3.5 trillion is the price tag and that you can't negotiate it down. Democratic voters, how often does this happen? Where Democrats don't deliver, and then the next election they run on, if you vote for us, don't worry, this time we will deliver. And then the same thing happens again. They get the votes, they don't deliver, and then say, well, don't worry, next time we'll deliver. You can't keep doing this and expect people to come out. Now, look, at some point, you can no longer make the argument for harm reduction, even though that ultimately is the point here, at least especially over the past, 40 years in American politics, is vote for harm reduction, as in vote against Republicans. But you can't expect to keep getting the numbers out, especially younger voters, on just the harm reduction argument, especially when there isn't all that much harm reduction going on if there aren't these actual investments into people and their lives. Now, let me get to the last thing here, which is on Manchin. So Manchin, of course, is a big obstacle in the Senate to get his vote for this, and Sinema as well, but we'll deal with her later. Let's talk about Manchin. So there is this new story out that I think Joe Biden could use against Manchin to get his vote. So Ryan Grimm here tweets out, news, damning new email shows Heather Bresch, I think, daughter of Joe Manchin, played a direct part in EpiPen price inflation scandal, according to just released court documents. And this story in the Intercept, I'll link to it below the video. But you have here a response to this from Kyle Kulinski with this great idea, which of course I don't think Joe Biden will use, but should use if he actually cares about getting Joe Manchin's vote. Kyle tweeting out here saying, if I'm Joe Biden, I tell Joe Manchin my DOJ may just investigate his daughter and she may just go to prison. Unless, of course, he takes another look at that $3.5 trillion bill and has a change of heart. It's what FDR and LBJ would have done, and it would have worked. Yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of tactic they would have used, and it's not an area I think Joe Biden is going to explore, but I imagine would work. Now, Joe Manchin may try to make a stink of it, but if Biden stuck to his guns and if Joe Manchin didn't vote for it and he went after his daughter, I think it would be great. But, that's another world that doesn't exist. But it shows you the tools that Democratic leadership have at their disposal that they are unwilling to use, at least so far, against these conservatives holding up this progress. Yet they will use many of these same tools against progressives, especially when it comes to elections and primaries. But when it comes to trying to get their actual agenda passed, and this is the Joe Biden agenda, these investments are part of his agenda, what he fought for, what he campaigned on, they're unwilling to use these tools to really push their more conservative Democrats, more conservative caucus members to support what they want to support. But we're going to see how it all plays out. I'll keep covering it. This is going to be, I guess, the big story this month to see what happens with these two bills, the budget reconciliation bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We're going to see how it all plays out. But I do think progressives have been very clear that they are not going to vote for the infrastructure bill unless they vote for the budget bill first. So let's hope they stick to that. I think they will stick to that. But ultimately, the way things are going, I also don't see Joe Manchin budging. And it's possible that nothing gets passed.